The Vanderbilt Commodores this season are the worst team I've ever seen in the Southeastern Conference. They won't win a game this year. But you know something? That might be changing for the Commodores in the future. Hi everybody, I'm Marky Billson, and the only reason I say this is Daniel Diermeyer, he's the chancellor at Vanderbilt, and he's looking for a new football coach. Fired Derek Mason after 0-8, the Sarah Fuller situation, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about that on a later video. I do think Fuller's been criticized a little too hard, and there's been a lot of inaccurate reporting about Sarah Fuller. But nevertheless, I do think that the Vanderbilt Commodores have for a long time lost on the gridiron because they're supposed to. You know, they're that academic school that isn't supposed to win on the gridiron, right? But the times they are changing. Stanford has no problem putting out very good football teams, and they have a more exclusive acceptance rate than even Harvard. Or what about Northwestern? They're about ready to play for the Big Ten title. So why not Vanderbilt? Because Vanderbilt does have a few things going for them. Playing in Nashville, for instance, you know, that kind of beats to a lot of people playing in Starkville or even Gainesville. It's a place people are moving to, so why not football recruits? And for that matter, why wouldn't the high academic standards be something that Vanderbilt could actually promote, much like Stanford does? Look, I've always said this. The most intelligent team on the gridiron has to have a huge advantage, don't they? So could the losing days of Vanderbilt, 25 straight losing seasons at one point, could they be a thing of the past? The only reason I really think that could happen, and by the way, I am the author of 5 years ago for Saturday Down South, How Vanderbilt Can Win, and you ought to check that out. I'll tell the ways they can do that here in just a second. But Diermeyer says that the new Vanderbilt football coach will have a say in improving facilities. And that's something that James Franklin, who had some success at Vanderbilt, actually was able to do. Franklin, under his tenure, Vanderbilt built an indoor practice facility for the football program. Also, I'm told that the chow hall, the training table, that the nutrition program is actually the best in all of college athletics. Maybe that's why Vanderbilt is a powerhouse in both baseball and women's tennis. Right, they eat well. But here's the other thing. If Vanderbilt is willing to pay for a coach, they might just change this losing system, because right now the SEC East is Georgia, Florida, and everybody else. And that means that Vanderbilt might be able to get ahead of the rest of the pack in the SEC East and then try to take those bold tries against Florida and Georgia, much like, let's say, Kentucky tries to do now, or, whoever, really. It's probably not going to be in the cards. I mean, it's right now inconceivable it would be in the cards for Vanderbilt to start taking on Georgia and Florida. It really hasn't happened, certainly not in modern times. But who knows in the future? And I say this because if Vanderbilt is willing to spend for a coach, it seems like other programs in the SEC that are losing aren't spending for coaches. Give you an example. South Carolina just signed Shane Beamer to be their head coach. Okay, they could have done worse to replace Will Muschamp. I think Beamer's an upgrade over Muschamp. But they're only paying Beamer $2.75 million a year. Sure, it's money you and I would like to make. But in the world of SEC head football coaches, it's right at the bottom. Sam Pittman, Arkansas, $2.9 million a year. That's all he makes. See why maybe the Hogs and the Gamecocks aren't winning the way they used to? If that's the money they're spending on the football program, it's just like a baseball team. If you're willing to spend the money on free agents, you're probably going to win. And if you're not, you're probably not going to win, at least not for any length of time. So it's the same sort of philosophy. When you see what the coaches are paid, you start to understand then why the program wins or why it doesn't. Tennessee, for instance, Jeremy Pruitt isn't making $4 million a year. Jeremy Pruitt is in the lower tier of paid coaches in the SEC. Meanwhile, Mark Stoops makes over $5 million a year. Now you see kind of where the money is going. And you also now see why Kentucky is able to trade punches with Tennessee, something they really have never been able to do, at least not since, I don't know, the Blandon Collier days, Bear Bryant, that sort of era. Interesting who Vanderbilt is said to be looking at to be their head coach. Traditionally, like Derek Mason, who came from Stanford as their defensive coordinator, they look for coaches from cerebral institutions, coaches that are going to get good academically minded football players. So, say Jeff Monin, the Army head coach, he's in the mix supposedly. That's an interesting idea because I know that Monin actually does recruit Tennessee, and while being a private school, the Vanderbilt football roster has players from all over the country. Doesn't hurt to shore up your backyard, even if you are a private school. Some other interesting names, Jeff Fisher, Bill O'Brien. I don't know if I'd want to bring Bill O'Brien back to the college ranks. He really didn't like it when he was at Penn State. Clark Lee, Notre Dame defensive coordinator, is talked about. So as Skip Holtz, Air Force's Troy Galloway. But here's a couple of interesting names. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina. I say that's an interesting name because historically Coastal Carolina was a Big South school and not a Southern Conference school back in the FCS days, because the Southern Conference schools really, they didn't want to bring in a Coastal Carolina, and they claimed academics. The Woffords and the VMIs and the Citadels and the Furmans said, Coastal Carolina, that's not all that restrictive. Now, East Tennessee State was promoted back in, and they accept 90% of their applicants, but you know what? That's where Jamie Caldwell went to school, East Tennessee State. So hiring such a coach to come to Vanderbilt, if that happens, if it is a Jamie Chadwell, that could mean a huge change in philosophy for the Vanderbilt football program. Another guy that they've talked about is Jonathan Hayes, who was the St. Louis Battlehawks head coach in the XFL. The Battlehawks were 3-1. Although that seems like an out-of-the-box hire, and it is, I'm going to tell you that I think Hayes is a very good coach. And I think he'll bring in a strong assistant coaching staff if he is hired. Question is, can he recruit? He hasn't been a college coach since he was an assistant in Oklahoma about 20 years ago. And would that be another Woody Woodenhofer? You wouldn't find a better defensive mind than Woody Woodenhofer. X's and O's, he'd have it 7 ways from Sunday. Recruiting, he was a pro coach. That just wasn't his bag. Now, I actually think that Vanderbilt is not the toughest place to win in the SEC for football coach. I think it's Kentucky. Because even with Stoops making $5 million a year, it's about half what John Calipari makes. The old line that 70 years ago, Kentucky won the SEC in both football and basketball, and they gave Bear Bryant a watch, and the boosters gave Adolph Rupp a car. When the mindset is that basketball first, that kind of makes it tough on the football team. Books first, not necessarily. Notre Dame. There have been good academic schools that have won and won big in college football. So could this all be changing? Look at what Vanderbilt is willing to pay. I know they probably won't release it, but look who they bring in. And again, if and when it comes out, the tax returns are audited, that sort of thing, and they find out what the coaches make, and it is on the upper half, then remember, Vanderbilt was going to match or even exceed Penn State's offer to James Franklin a few years ago. If they put in James Franklin money for the next head coach, Vanderbilt could actually win some games. Say what you will there. So, there is another suggestion, though. Vanderbilt this year is, as I've said, the worst SEC team I think I've ever seen. They're 0-8. Here's an interesting thing. Vanderbilt, despite known for losing, has never had a winless season on the gridiron. This will probably be their first. Last chance at a victory is today when they host Tennessee, but it's quite simply they just don't have the number of players. That's why Sarah Fuller was asked to kick, of course. Players are sick. Players are not showing up. Against South Carolina, they had 53 players. They couldn't have enough players to play a game against Georgia. This is a bad time for the Vanderbilt Commodores. So that also means, though, that there probably are more scholarships available than what you'd normally have if and when you inherit a team. So look very closely at how Vanderbilt handles this situation. Are they going to go the Johnny Majors rebuild way or the Les Miles rebuild way? Okay, Johnny, here's some college football history. Johnny Majors went to Pitt in 1972, and Pitt at the time said you can have as many scholarships as you want, sign all the players you want. And guess what? He was able to get Tony Dorsett, it was Dorsett back then, to sign with him. I'll have you play right away. That's how he got him over Penn State. Penn State at the time had John Capoletta, who was about to win the Heisman Trophy. So Dorsett wasn't going to play over Capoletta if he went to Penn State, but he went to Pitt. Pitt was 1-10. I got a spot for you at tailback. Goes to Pitt. And of course, then that wasn't the only good player that they brought in, but they were able to have unlimited scholarships at the time. Now there are scholarship limitations, but it seems like Vanderbilt will have more to offer than their peers. So if they can take advantage of that right now, or in the next couple of years, and go that Johnny Majors route, could bring in a lot of good players. Hey, I mean, it's not like right now there are a lot of great incumbent stars right now. You could bring in some freshmen and say, you'll play right away. The way not to rebuild? The Les Miles way. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is all Les Miles' fault, but Les Miles was signed to a contract at Kansas to revive them, and he makes less than $3 million a year. Now, after the pandemic, he's had his salary cut even more. Les Miles' salary would make him the least paid head coach in the SEC. It's what Derek Mason used to be, and that's why Vanderbilt lost. Why is Kansas losing now? Les Miles has won a national title. But if you're paying your coach less, it seems like you're probably spending less in other facets of the football program too. You get what you pay for. So which way do they go? Do they hire a big name coach but say, maybe we can get him for the cheap? Or are they willing to, hey, you do have the free reign, just like James Franklin did, or Johnny Majors low those years ago at Pitt. Now, the way I think that Vanderbilt can win, and I wrote this 5 years ago for Saturday Down South, is first of all, you start with a quarterback. Guess what? A cerebral institution is a great place for a quarterback to go and grow. Jay Cutler at Vanderbilt would be an example of this. But if you look at it, the really high academic schools have traditionally produced a fair amount of quality quarterbacks into the National Football League. Good example of this, Stanford has had 3 quarterbacks taken number 1 overall in the draft. Until Oklahoma did it recently, they were the only school that could say that. By the way, Jim Plunkett, John Elway, Andrew Luck. Okay, those are the guys right there. So a quarterback can be had at a cerebral institution. I think it helps promote them for the NFL, and that's something that you can sell. Come to Vanderbilt, and we're going to really exercise your mind as well as your body, and that's going to help you become an NFL quarterback. I think that playing in Nashville is a big factor. I mean, would you rather play in Nashville or Starkville? You're going to a place where people are moving to left and right. Nashville, Tennessee. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America. There's always that old saw, and I'm told by people at Vanderbilt that there's a gap between athletics and the administration. Doesn't seem it's that way in baseball, like I said. So, but if there is any gap, I mean, that should be easy enough to fix. Tell you what, when your football team wins, more students apply to your school. When more students apply to your school, you can be more exclusive. Under James Franklin, Vanderbilt was very exclusive in who they admitted. It was about 9% of the applicants came in. Before that, when they lost all the time, they didn't have nearly as many applicants. And they accepted 30% of their applicants. Same as about Wake Forest or so. Find a good coach and keep them. That's important. To do that, you pay them. And also, one thing I've always thought, Vanderbilt Stadium, there's talk about maybe building a new stadium or so, and maybe that's what they have to do. Vanderbilt Stadium's been around since 1922, and it's the smallest in the SEC, but I've always had this thought. Why couldn't you have Vanderbilt Stadium become a Cameron Indoor Stadium like what Duke has? That doesn't have 10,000 seats, but it's the small, intimate environment that makes it very special. If you could ever have that at Vanderbilt, maybe the small environment there, you can play at Wrigley Field, or Tennessee will have 100,000 seats, but, who's going there for nosebleed seats? Who goes to a school for nosebleed seats? That game day environment in a stadium, you say, old historic stadium, thing is, it hasn't been renovated since 1981, so that's a challenge for the new football coach. Look, it can happen here. So I'm going to tell you, look very carefully at this. Vanderbilt could be a winner very soon, but it does depend on what coach they're going to hire. So I'm going to next conversation, I'm going to talk a little bit. Vanderbilt's making some headlines because their women's basketball team is going to stay in the locker room for the national anthem. Plus, there's Sarah Fuller kicking for the football team. And folks, nobody knows more about female kickers in college football than I do. You'll hear about that in the next video. Until then, I'm Marky Billson.